A nameless dog, a man with no escapione confined in a frigid basement, bound and blindfolded, the other astray with shattered paws and a faded memory of love. No badge, no Parker, no orders, just raw instinct. When everyone else turned their back on Deputy Ethan Ward, a forgotten German shepherd remained steadfast. He sensed the silence pierced through the darkness, and what followed will rekindle your belief in loyalty and second chances. If you think no hero should ever be forsaken, whether man or dog, hit that subscribe button. What you're about to see may linger in your heart forever. The snow had blanketed Red Hollow, Montana, the night before, enveloping it in a thick, white hush. The air was sharp and brittle, infused with the scent of pine, as the sun began its struggle to break through the heavy, ironclad clouds. It was early January, the kind of morning when even the wind seemed weary, too frozen to howl. At the town's northern outskirts, past the railroad tracks and the remnants of a logging supply yard, stood an abandoned warehouse, 3 stories tall. Its red bricks flaked from years of exposure and neglect, while windows lay shattered or boarded up with warped plywood. A chain-link fence, half collapsed, warned off trespassers, with rusted no-entry signs. Through this eerie landscape padded a figure that seemed out of place. A German shepherd, ribs visible beneath his patchy coat, moved with cautious determination. His name, once etched on a collar now long gone, was Shadow. Yet the world hadn't called him anything in over a year. About 7 years old, Shadow had once been a certified search and rescue dog, trained to find lost hikers in the mountains and survivors in rubble. His thick coat, now weather-beaten and caked with snow, had once gleamed black and tan. His right ear bore a small notch, a scar from a rock fall during a rescue drill years ago. His eyes, amber-ringed and alert, still held the intelligence and discipline of the soldier he used to be. But it wasn't war that broke him, it was loss. He had been with Officer Sarah Grady, a tall, sharp-eyed woman with sun-kissed skin and a voice like gravel softened by kindness. Sarah had been his partner, his handler, and his home. When she died in an apartment fire, trapped during an evacuation gone wrong, something in Shadow shattered. He had tried to pull her from the burning beams until his paws bled, but the fire claimed her. When the department took him in, something inside him refused to stay. One night, he slipped away into the woods and never came back. Now living off scraps and instinct, Shadow drifted through the outskirts of town, a mere specter among the shadows. Yet that morning an unusual sound pierced the stillness, a whimper, not from the usual wildlife, but something distinctly human. It was low, weak, and desperate. He paused, tilting his head as the sound echoed again, muffled by the layers of wood and snow. His ears twitched as he stepped toward the warehouse, his nose working furiously. The scent hit him hard, blood, sweat, and fear human. He crept along the side of the building, paused silent in the snow, until he discovered a crack in a basement window, barely big enough to breathe through. He pressed his snout against the glass, warm breath fogging it slightly. Inside, illuminated only by a flickering bulb strung from a frayed wire, was a scene that rooted Shadow in place. A man sat bound to a chair in the middle of a stark concrete room. His head hung low, obscured by a tightly wrapped black cloth over his eyes. His wrists were secured with coarse cord, and his knuckles bore the marks of struggle, scraped and bleeding. Though his badge was missing, his uniform shirt remained unblemished, tattered and stained yet identifiable. This was Deputy Ethan Ward, and Shadow was aware of it. Ethan was 30, lean and fit, with a closely cropped brown beard, and short dark hair now matted with sweat. The town had plastered his photo across every pole and shop window for 3 days. Shadow had seen them. He hadn't understood the words, but he understood urgency. Scent never lies, and the man inside smelled of pain but also strength, something familiar, the same steadiness Sarah used to carry inside the room. Ethan stirred, a soft moan slipping from his lips. Shadow let out a low growl, a response driven by instinct rather than threat. Ethan's head snapped up. Though he couldn't see, he could hear it. Simeon was there. The voice that reached him was gravelly. "Who goes there?" he uttered in a strained voice. "Please help me." Rose's paws scraped against the icy glass. Ethan stood still as the growl echoed once more, this time more subdued. "Dog," he murmured. "Is that God? Is that a dog?" In that moment, a transformation occurred within Shadow. The old training fell into alignment. This was no mere man in distress. It was a rescue mission, and he was the sole individual capable of executing it. He clawed at the window with renewed vigor, yet it remained immovable, the room locked tight, and the walls impenetrable. The acrid odor of blood and mildew filled his senses. He couldn't breach the barrier yet, but he could recall. He could retrace his steps. Shadow retreated from the glass, while Ethan felt a surge of tension as the bulb flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced beyond the frame. The captor was returning. Shadow blended seamlessly into the darkness. Several blocks away, near the outskirts of Main Street, a woman emerged from a small metal structure, its faded blue paint proclaiming it as Bennett Animal Clinic. Emma Bennett, 28, stood petite with a fair complexion. Her unruly strawberry blonde curls gathered in a casual bun. Freckles adorned her nose, and her boots bore the marks of mud, telling tales of her adventures. Emma exuded a serene warmth, yet her eyes held a cautious glint, a remnant of years spent caring for animals that others had abandoned. Growing up in Red Hollow, she left for veterinary school but returned after her father's passing, inheriting both the clinic and his routine of feeding strays behind the building. That morning, she carried a dish of kibble and a thermos cap of water, placing them on a cement slab behind the clinic. With a gentle whistle, she called out, "Come on, soldier," her voice soft as she added, "You've earned breakfast." To her surprise, the large German shepherd approached, limping slightly, eyes cautious yet focused on her. She crouched down, providing space and patience. "You look like hell," she said softly. Instead of eating right away, Shadow dropped something at her feet. Emma blinked. It was a mud-crusted shoe, torn and wet, clearly used. As she picked it up, she froze. The leather bore a patch, an emblem, a silver star with a pine tree. She had seen this before. It was the standard-issue duty boot for the Red Hollow Police Department. And someone had bled in it? Shadow took 2 steps back, eyes steady on hers. Then, without a sound, he turned and disappeared into the falling snow. Emma gazed at the shoe, her heart racing. She understood what needed to be done and reached for her phone. Emma Bennett positioned herself at her desk in the rear of Bennett Animal Clinic. The fluorescent light above flickered with an erratic buzz that had been tormenting her for weeks. The scent of antiseptic and fur hung in the air, yet her attention was fixated on the muddied boot now placed on a blue towel beside her keyboard. She had cleaned it just enough to reveal the logo, a silver star with a pine tree crest. This was no ordinary boot. It was a Red Hollow. The police department revealed faint traces of dried blood near the tongue and heel, causing her stomach to twist. She opened her laptop and accessed the local news stream, while snow continued to fall steadily outside, blanketing the small mountain town in a hushed white stillness. The video on the screen buffered before it played. There he was, Deputy Ethan Ward, age 30, last seen on patrol 3 nights ago. Radio contact was lost just before 11 p.m. There was no sign of struggle, no suspect, no vehicle, no body, just a good cop who disappeared into the dark. Emma's jaw tightened. She wasn't particularly close to Ethan, but memories of him from town events lingered. He was the type of man who greeted children by name, the kind who returned lost dogs even after his shift had ended. She recalled a moment when he had crouched down to offer a granola bar to a runaway stray behind the clinic, a German shepherd, no less, the very same one she had just fed. Her heart raced as the realization struck her fully. The bell above the clinic door chimed as she reached for her phone and dialed. The voice on the other end answered in a low drawl. "Crimson Void PD, this is dispatch." "This is Emma Bennett from the vet clinic," she said to breathe short. "I think I have something." I found a police baton of yours. I think it might belong to Ethan Ward." There was a pause. "Are you certain it didn't come from one of the patrol members? There's blood on it, and a dog delivered it to me. A German Shepherd, no tags." Another pause, then, "Stay where you are, we're sending someone." Within 20 minutes, the door swung open once more, revealing a tall figure who shook the snow from his brown sheriff's coat. His lined face was framed by a short white beard, and his expression bore more weariness than severity. Sheriff Frank Briggs, aged 62, had been a steadfast presence in Red Hollow, outlasting many of its residents. Known for his calm demeanor and unwavering instincts, he was the type to embrace long pauses before making decisions and to finish a cup of black coffee before addressing any emergencies. He removed his gloves and glanced down at his boots. Emma passed him the item, asking, "You mentioned a dog delivered this?" Emma nodded as the male German Shepherd caught her eye. He appeared malnourished, with an old scar on his right ear, and he limped slightly. Yet there was a determination in his gaze, as if he had a mission to fulfill. Briggs let out a soft grunt as he turned the boot over. This was Ethan's size, his name still etched on the inside lining. He glanced around, wondering where exactly the dog had gone. Emma pointed to the back alley leading north to the tree line and the old lumberyard. Briggs let out a slow breath. "That place hasn't seen a soul since the timber plant shut down 12 years ago. Locals refer to it as dead ground." She added softly, "I think the dog wants you to follow him." Briggs glanced at her before shifting his gaze back to the boot. He nodded once. That afternoon a meeting took place in the back office of the station. Officer Dean Stokes, in his late 40s, stocky and clean-shaven with a constant scowl, leaned against the map of Red Hollow's north quadrant. He pointed at a shaded square. "This is the warehouse compound, 3 buildings, partially collapsed, 0 active leases. It has been more than 2 years since the last patrol." Across the table sat Sergeant Claire Durham, 34, lean and precise, her close-cropped hair framing a tactical mind honed in state police. She flipped through the forensics photos of Ethan's locker. If someone took him and is holding him nearby, that would be the only location not visible on heat maps or traffic cameras. Briggs stepped into the room, presenting the boot encased in a clear evidence bag. "This was brought in by a stray this morning, covered in blood. It belongs to Ethan." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in before continuing. "The dog led west from Emma Bennett's clinic, the same direction as the lumberyard." Stokes frowned. "A stray dog is our only lead." Briggs locked eyes with him. "It's more than we had yesterday." Claire nodded. "Then we proceed with it." Briggs tapped the map. "We'll keep it under wraps for the time being. No notifications, no information breaches, just prepare a search team for dawn. That's our window before the next front rolls in that night." Emma stood at the back of the clinic, snow crunching under her boots. She left a small dish of warm stew and a fresh wool glove beside it. The wind cut through her jacket, and she hugged herself tight. "Where are you, boy?" she whispered. "Far off." Just beyond the frost-furred fence, a dark shape moved. 2 amber eyes blinked in the dark, then vanished. She smiled back at the warehouse. Darkness reigned. Ethan's head sagged forward. His limbs were numb from the cold, and rope burns stung his wrists. Every breath felt heavier. The room smelled of oil and damp wood. He didn't know how many days had passed, but he recalled the footsteps, the voice of the one who provided just enough to get by, who spoke of justice and punishment, claiming that men like him were always deceitful. A faint scratch echoed, then again near the wall, followed by a low growl. He straightened, heart racing. "You returned," he whispered, still blindfolded. "I knew you would." The dog whined softly as a storm brewed outside, the cold seeping in through every crack of the concrete walls like an invisible tide rising through the bones of the deputy. Ethan Ward sat hunched in the chair, his arms securely bound behind him, the ropes digging into his skin, leaving it raw. A strip of cloth was tied across his eyes, too tight to be a mere oversight. The blindfold deepened the darkness, creating a second layer of confinement atop the first. The room was devoid of windows, illuminated only by a flickering ceiling bulb that emitted a faint hum, its light barely grazing the floor. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood, rusted metal, and damp fabric, but beneath it all lingered something more unsettling: sweat, oiled blood, and a faintly sweet aroma reminiscent of pine intertwined with fear. Ethan stirred, his lips chapped and his jaw sore. A part of him had stopped counting the hours or days. He wasn't sure anymore. The last memory he had before waking here was the sound of tires on gravel and the sudden violent jolt when something struck the side of his cruiser, then pain, then black. A sound broke through the stillness. It was soft, too soft to be human, nails clicking lightly against concrete. Then a soft exhale, warm and close. Ethan stiffened. Is someone there? He croaked, voice brittle from thirst. No answer, just a presence, something close watching. Then he felt it, a warm tongue against his wrist. Quick, careful, deliberate. Ethan gasped and jerked in surprise. Wait, hey dog. His words came out, and uncertain. He held still, heart hammering. The tongue came again, this time licking gently at the rope as if testing it. Ethan went completely still. He knew that kind of behavior. It wasn't wild, it wasn't panic. This was training, this was deliberate. Another sound followed, the soft grind of claws against the cement. As the dog repositioned, Ethan felt fur brush his leg, and then something nudged the blindfold. Teeth, soft but firm, they caught the edge of the cloth. The knot had been tied badly. Slowly, carefully, the pressure increased, and suddenly light, dim, pulsing, hazy light, but enough to make Ethan recoil and squint. His vision burned with the sudden contrast, and everything swam for a moment. But when his eyes finally adjusted, he saw him, a German shepherd. The dog was lean but powerful, his black and tan coat matted with mud and snow, the fur along his spine ragged from exposure. He had a visible limp in his rear leg, and his ears were nicked. His eyes, though, were alert and bright, a deep amber ringed with old sadness. He looked like he had seen too many winters alone. Ethan struggled to contain his feelings. Where did you come from, boy? The dog fixed its gaze on him, ears alert, then moved closer to sniff the rope at Ethan's feet. Clever, Ethan murmured. Are you trying to lend me a hand? The shepherd remained silent, simply circling once before settling beside Ethan with a disciplined stillness, as though he were a sentinel. Meanwhile, at the Red Hollow Police Department, Sergeant Claire Durham stood in the tech room, fixated on a paused video frame. She gestured toward the screen, instructing, rewind 5 seconds. Officer Matt Reyes, the department's latest addition, a 26-year-old with a lean build, dark-rimmed glasses, and a background in digital forensics, tapped a few keys on the keyboard. He possessed a serene and measured presence, often remaining silent unless encouraged to share his thoughts, and his speech flowed with a deliberate and contemplative rhythm. There goes the shepherd again, he remarked as Emma noted. He's crossing County Road 12 with something in his hands. Claire leaned in and asked, could you zoom in? The grainy image adjusted. In the shepherd's mouth dangled a single boot, clear tread, dark leather, blood along the collar. That's Cole's, she murmured. Reyes tapped the timestamp. It was 4:47 a.m. yesterday, roughly 90 minutes before Emma Bennett reported it. Claire crossed her arms, noting that the dog had found Ethan first, just as Briggs entered the room. Snow lingered on his shoulders. What are we observing? Claire highlighted clear evidence that the dog isn't merely scavenging. He's guiding us. Briggs examined the screen before turning his gaze to the wall map. That intersection, located a mile southeast of the old lumber compound, aligns with her account, Sir Reyes stated. I delved into the archived K9 files and found a shepherd that matches the physical description. The former search and rescue dog was named Shadow and was partnered with Officer Sarah Grady before her passing 2 years ago. Briggs tilted his head. Is that the dog that went missing after the fire? Reyes nodded. The records indicate he vanished during the week of the funeral and was never seen again. Claire remarked, if that's him, he hasn't forgotten how to save people. Briggs glanced at the monitor, preparing a drone unit. If he was out there again tonight, he wanted eyes on the situation. Meanwhile, back at the warehouse, Shadow stood alert, ears twitching. He sensed something, a vibration in the floor, a creak above. Someone was approaching. Ethan tensed. "What is it?" he whispered. Shadow emitted a low growl, inching closer to the door, his body sinking into a defensive crouch, hackles raised. Ethan's heart raced. "You should go," he whispered. "Get out of here before he sees you." Yet Shadow remained still. The footsteps halted just outside the door, followed by a scraping sound, a metal latch sliding. Thin silence enveloped the space. Ethan held his breath, yet the door remained shut. Whoever it was had reconsidered, at least for the moment. On the outskirts of town, Emma made her way to the rear of the clinic, inspecting the food bowl she had left empty. A faint smile graced her lips until she spotted something unusual. In the snow, a paw print accompanied by a drop of blood. The smile vanished as she turned and hurried back inside. The flickering light bulb swayed softly above, casting playful shadows on the damp concrete walls. Assistant Ethan Ward blinked vigorously against the faint light, his pupils gradually adjusting after what felt like hours, perhaps days, spent in enforced darkness. The coarse fabric that had once obscured his vision now hung loosely around his neck, worn down by the quiet resolve of the dog sitting before him, poised and attentive. The German shepherd's eyes, a rich, soulful brown edged in amber, were laden with memories. They remained unwavering, seeking neither validation nor distraction, simply observing with unwavering loyalty. Shadow had selected him for an instant. Ethan overlooked the rope searing into his wrists, the pain in his back, the tingling in his legs. Of everything else faded away, leaving only the comforting presence of the dog. It felt oddly familiar, even though they had never crossed paths before. He exhaled slowly, a long, trembling breath escaping his lips. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice rough and strained. "You've opened my eyes once more." Shadow tilted his head, ears twitching, then moved with sudden urgency. The dog padded toward the door of the basement chamber and let out a low, sharp bark, followed by another, louder one that echoed down the cement hallway. His tail stood stiff, every muscle tense. He was calling for help. Ethan straightened in the chair, his voice quivering with newfound hope as he asked, "Are you trying to call someone? Smart boy, keep it up." Shadow barked once more, the sound echoing off the walls of the Red Hollow Police Department. Emma Bennett stood in the narrow hallway outside the tech office, her coat damp from melted snow. She held a thick manila folder in her arms, a soft frown gracing her face. When Sergeant Claire Durham stepped out to greet her, Emma handed over the file. "I sifted through my old files," Emma said, "including photos, notes, and intake forms. This is all the information I have on a dog that resembles your stray black and tan shepherd male, approximately 7 years old, with trained responses. Scar on the left ear, there's a slight hip imbalance in the right rear leg. I once treated a dog similar to him. His name was Shadow." Claire scanned the documents, nodding slowly. "We've had him identified through canine records. He was assigned to Officer Sarah Grady's unit 2 years ago." Emma exhaled. "I remember Sarah. She brought him in once after a wildfire deployment. She said he saved a child stuck under collapsed shed. He wasn't just a good dog. He was surgical." Claire's demeanor became gentler. "She perished in that apartment collapse, didn't she?" Emma nodded. "He vanished on the day of her funeral. Just disappeared at that moment, officer." Matt Reyes emerged from the tech room, having detected something unusual. A motion sensor from the drone feed indicated activity near the southern corner of the lumber yard. A shepherd-sized shape was moving east to west, pausing near a basement vent. He pulled up a grainy thermal image, revealing a warm-bodied silhouette next to a much larger cold structure. Claire glanced at Emma. "Your dog may have just guided us to Ethan." Emma sensed a constriction in her chest, urging her not to linger in the warehouse. Ethan recoiled at the echo of footsteps overhead. Shadow ceased his barking, sinking into a crouch by the stairwell, ears pinned back. The heavy footfalls diminished, 2, then silence. Ethan murmured, "That's him." Isn't it? Shadow remained silent, yet the rigid stance and narrowed gaze revealed the truth. The door remained shut, and instead, a sharp bang echoed from deeper within the building, metal striking concrete. A signal. A warning. Ethan was uncertain. Shadow moved away from the stairs and rejoined Ethan, settling back down beside him. He gently brushed his nose against Ethan's restrained hands, conveying a silent message. Hold on. Meanwhile, in the command office at Red Hollow PD, Sheriff Frank Briggs leaned over the map of the lumberyard, his glasses slipping down his nose. His weathered hands hovered above the grid of paper. This compound has 4 main structures, he said. One of them collapsed in '09. The basement is still stable barely. If the dogs are hanging around that spot, that's where we start. Claire marked a red spot by the loading dock. We need to proceed quietly, without sirens. Our priority is to keep Ethan alive. Briggs grunted. Then we better move before that storm front hits. The door creaked open behind them, and Deputy Aaron Leach stepped inside. In his mid-30s, with a red beard and a solid build, he was known for being cautious yet meticulous. Teams assembled and ready, he said. We've got drone eyes, 2K9s, and thermoscope kits. Briggs nodded. Let's go get our man. Outside, the wind had picked up, and a gray wall of snow rolled over the mountains like an invading army in the basement. Shadow let out a low whimper, a sharp sound that echoed his nervous energy as it coursed through him. Ethan leaned his head back against the wall, his voice trembling as he spoke. You're not just any stray, are you? Shadow met his gaze. Ethan smiled, a subtle yet genuine expression. You were prepared for this. For individuals like me, you chose me. The canine affectionately licked his hand. Ethan felt a fragile, sharp hope rise in his chest. He closed his eyes and waited as the wind screamed against the rusted aluminum siding of the abandoned lumber warehouse, slicing through every cracked window and loose shutter. Snow danced in sharp spirals across the half-buried loading docks while the evening light began to fade behind the fir-covered hills of Red Hollow. The town below was quiet. Christmas lights clung to the gutters, their flickering glow barely piercing the storm's gloom. In this neglected corner, only shadows danced within the concrete basement, while the overhead bulb swayed gently, responding to the faint echo of footsteps from afar. Slow and deliberate, Ethan Ward, still bound and aching, lifted his head slightly. His eyes narrowed as he tuned into the rhythm of the boots overhead. He had heard them before. The captor was returning. Shadow crouched low in the corner, tucked behind a rusted metal shelving unit. His tan and black coat blended with the dusty shadows, and his breath came low and slow. Every hair along his spine was raised. The figure that had just crossed the threshold was familiar, a blend of anger, perspiration, and the lingering scent of old cigarettes, a clear indication that something was amiss. The door creaked open, and in walked Ray Morton, a man in his late 50s, stocky with a stooped posture and deeply set eyes. He stepped in, flashlight in one hand and a tray of food in the other. His jeans bore the marks of oil stains, and his flannel coat hung loosely, frayed at the sleeves. A scruffy beard framed his face, and his thinning black hair was slicked back. A long scar traced down his left jawline, a remnant of his past as a night guard at a mental health facility. Rai had a history of assault, unstable behavior, and multiple instances of threatening behavior toward colleagues. His dismissal had followed a breakdown, and he had slipped into the fringes of Red Hollow, residing in trailers, taking on odd jobs, and gathering peculiar grievances. Now, he stood before Ethan, his eyes meticulously scanning his face with an inscrutable intensity. "Are you asleep?" Rai inquired, placing the tray down. "I bet you're hungry, Deputy. I've shown quite a bit of generosity, haven't I?" Ethan remained silent, his throat aflame with unspoken words. He understood the danger of provoking Ray, whose eyes were narrowed in a predatory glare. "You always wore that smile on your patrols, acting as if you were above us, as if you held secrets we could never grasp. And now look at you, blindfolded and bound." He leaned in closer, his voice low and menacing. "You know why you're here." Ethan remained silent as Ray exhaled sharply. "You're here to uphold their rules, not to seek truth or justice. You overlook the presence of individuals like me in the shadows." Shadow shifted slightly, his body trembling not with fear but with restraint. His amber eyes were fixed on Ray's belt, where a box cutter dangled in a leather pouch. Ray stood once more, moving slowly around the coal. "It's amusing how people tend to overlook the quiet ones, but I always remember." He circled to the back of the room, muttering something softly. That was when Shadow glided in, as silent as mist, creeping along the far wall and placing each paw with meticulous precision. Ray remained oblivious. Outside, the snowstorm had calmed to a gentle flurry, though the clouds still loomed darkly in the sky. Just beyond the lumberyard's fence, two unmarked SUVs sat idling, their lights off inside. Sheriff Frank Briggs crouched over a handheld tablet, intently observing the thermal feedback from the drone unit. His brow furrowed beneath his wool-lined cap, and his breath was visible in the cold air. To his left stood Sergeant Claire Durham, clad in tactical gear with a short-barreled rifle slung across her chest, moved with silent boots over the frozen ground, her unwavering gaze fixed on the building. "There's activity in the basement once more," she remarked. A sturdy figure stepped in, likely a man. Briggs nodded. "That's in." Deputy Aaron Leach, with his red beard and composed demeanor, stood at a distance, guiding his fellow officers with subtle hand signals. He reported that the east access door remained sealed, but they had discovered a trail of boot prints and paw prints originating from the slope near the old loading ramp. The presence of both dog and man could indicate the whereabouts of their missing individuals, including Cole Briggs. He adjusted his radio, instructing Team Alpha to hold their position until he gave the signal. "No gunfire unless fired upon," he emphasized, maintaining a focus on their objective. Ethan inhaled deeply as Claire's voice cut through the air like steel. Inside the warehouse, Ry resumed his monologue, gesturing toward the mold-stained ceiling. "This place," he said, "used to be filled with men like me. Hard work, quiet nights nobody cared. Then they shut it down, sent us home with nothing but a pat on the back. You know who didn't lose their job?" He leaned in closer, his tone conspiratorial. "You. Your kind." Shadow stepped forward, one paw at a time, while Ethan, watching from the periphery, murmured under his breath, "Not yet, not yet." Ry's gaze shifted, landing on the dog, and he froze. The shadow remained motionless, but Ry's expression contorted. "You again?" Ethan's breath caught as Ray stepped forward slowly, reaching toward his belt. "I thought I saw you last night." Ry's lips peeled back just enough to reveal teeth. Ry growled, "You bring someone with you." "Mutt, huh?" "Someone out there with a badge." Then came the barking loud, commanding voice that echoed through the building. With it came voices from outside. "Police! Come out with your hands where we can see them." Ray whirled around, panic illuminating his expression. "No, no, no, no." He seized Ethan's collar, yanking him to the side, but Shadow was already in the air, launching his attack. Ray struck full in the chest, teeth gritted, aiming not to maim but to disarm. The two crashed to the floor, and the box cutter clattered out of Ray's reach. Ethan tumbled sideways, his heart racing. Shadow let out a low growl, looming over Ray's chest. Suddenly, the door burst open, and beams of flashlight cut through the room. "Freeze!" Claire's voice sliced through the air with sharp precision. Briggs trailed behind her, weapon at the ready, while Leach hurried to Ethan, swiftly working to free him. "We've got you, Deputy. You're safe now." Ethan blinked rapidly. "The dog he'd brought you," Briggs observed Shadow, who remained vigilant over Ray, whose arms now rested limply at his sides. "Good boy," he murmured. The scent of antiseptic lingered heavily in the air, blending with the sterile brightness of the hospital room. It was quiet save for the rhythmic beeping of machines and the occasional crackle of the overhead speaker announcing visiting hours. Ethan Ward shifted beneath the thin blanket, his right arm wrapped in a bandage at the wrist for lines snaking from the crook of his elbow. The dull ache in his ribs served as a stark reminder of how narrowly he had escaped, how close everything had come to an end in that cold, rotting basement. Yet, more than the bruises or the gnawing hunger, it was the silence that resonated most profoundly now, silence left in the wake of the dog who had saved him. A knock echoed at the door, followed by the creak of it opening. Sheriff Frank Briggs stepped inside, snow still clinging to the folds of his long brown coat. His weathered face bore the marks of another sleepless night, and his gray eyes held a softness that was unusual as he approached the bed, accompanied by Sergeant Claire Duran. Her posture remained straight and composed as ever, yet the tightness around her mouth hinted at a trace of lingering adrenaline. "Good morning, Deputy," Briggs said, drawing a chair nearer. "How are you feeling?" Ethan managed to sit up a bit, as if he had just battled a wood chipper. Claire offered a faint smile, indicating that it was a good sign it was still himself. "Ray?" Ethan inquired, already anticipating the response while in custody. Briggs responded that he isn't saying much, but we've begun to assemble the details. He brought up someone. Ethan spoke in a hushed tone, revealing that he had acquired a replacement. He wasn't working solo, Claire acknowledged. He mentioned a man in a white van, claiming that this man had promised him a child who could take the place of another. Jessica, Ethan inquired of his daughter. Briggs passed away 3 years ago in a car accident, losing his wife on the same day. It seems he never truly recovered from that, Claire remarked. He's not stable enough to be our mastermind, and if someone else really turned you in, we might be facing something much larger. Ethan took a moment to absorb the situation, and after a brief silence, the dog Briggs shook his head. Our team spotted him dashing toward the woods just as we managed to get Ethan out, but he vanished before we could catch up to him. Claire glanced at Ethan. "You mentioned he was more than just trained," Ethan replied. "He understood how to flank, when to stay low. He was attentive to commands, even when I couldn't provide them. He was a true professional." Briggs shared a look with Claire that aligns with the insights we gained from Emma Bennett. Ethan arched an eyebrow at the vet. Claire nodded as she brought in the medical records from this week. These were old ones she had used to treat a K-9 named Shadow, who belonged to Officer Sarah Grady. Ethan whispered, "I remember her. She died when the building collapsed 2 years ago. Shadow vanished following her funeral." Briggs remarked, "No one has laid eyes on him since." Until this moment. Ethan reclined, the truth weighing heavily on his chest. He realized he hadn't merely survived, he had rediscovered his identity across town. The windows of Emma Bennett's small cabin fogged with the steam of a boiling kettle. The place was warm and cluttered, lived in. Books stacked along low shelves, a wool blanket draped over a threadbare couch. At the foot of it sat a blood-stained fleece pad, folded with care. Emma knelt beside it now, gently scrubbing the dried smear of red with a wet cloth. She didn't cry. Emma wasn't the crying kind, but her movements were slow and reverent. Shadow had rested here just 2 nights ago, bringing the boot to her. She recalled how he had observed her not as a stray, but as someone who truly comprehended the space he occupied. He hadn't pleaded, he had simply waited. A voice echoed from the other room, "Hey, Emma." It was Danny Farrow, her neighbor and longtime friend, in his 40s. Bearded, with a weary frame and soft eyes, he often appeared in grease-streaked overalls from his auto repair shop. He stepped into the living room, holding 2 mugs of tea. "You okay?" he asked, setting one down beside her. She nodded. "I'm fine, just thinking about the dog." Emma looked up. "He's not just a dog. Danny, his name was Shadow. He was a K-9 who saved that deputy's wife." Danny sat beside her, then asked, "Where is he now?" She didn't answer at first, then said, "Out there, watching, healing, waiting for someone to come find him." Danny took a sip of his tea. "Then we will meet at the Red Hollow station." The interview room glowed under the harsh light of a solitary bulb hanging above a worn metal table. Ray Morton sat in a gray t-shirt, staring down at his hands, unmoving. His eyes were glazed, bearing a half-lidded expression. Flat, Claire Durham sat opposite him, her notebook open but untouched. "You said someone brought the deputy to you," she said. "Who? What was his name?" Rai remained silent. "Was it the man in the white van?" she prompted. "You mentioning him." Ray blinked slowly, then almost to himself. He whispered, "He said he could fix it." "Give me another." Jessica remarked that the ones who went unnoticed were often the most significant, like strays. Claire tensed, questioning the implication. Ray glanced at her for the first time, a fractured smile appearing on his lips. "They're all just strays. No one misses them if they don't make a sound outside the room." Briggs turned away from the one-way mirror. "Get a photo lineup of missing children. Any unsolved abductions from the last 5 years in the Tri-County area." Officer Matt Reyes, standing nearby, nodded, indicating he had already begun the task. Sheriff Briggs's voice lowered as he conveyed to the FBI that this situation was more significant than they had anticipated. That night, beneath the profound stillness of the forest, a figure glided through the trees. Shadow moved deliberately, favoring one paw as his eyes swept across the ridgeline. Weariness and pain weighed on him, yet he was alive. He paused near the ridge overlooking Red Hollow and settled onto a flat stone. A final glance back at the valley revealed the town glowing softly orange in the night. He closed his eyes, for now his mission was complete, but he would linger in memory. The morning light draped over Red Hollow, enveloping it in the weighty hush of winter. Yet within the sheriff's office, the air buzzed with a palpable tension, alive with activity. Documents sprawled across every desk, the whiteboards adorned with hastily written names and indistinct license plates at the heart of the briefing room. Sheriff Frank Briggs stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his lined face tight with focus. The recent statements from Ray Morton were disturbing in both content and implication, cracking open something far larger than one man's madness. Now they had to follow the shadow it left behind. Ray wasn't acting alone, Claire Durham said, pointing at a series of overlapping circles on the projector screen, her tone clinical and crisp. He received instructions from a burner phone registered out of state. Signal pings indicated contact near a decommissioned scout camp west of the highway, off-grid for years an ideal spot for concealing vehicles. Agent Mike Hanley, in his mid-40s, clean-cut with close-cropped gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, nodded. Hanley had arrived from the FBI's missing persons unit the night before. His suit jacket never seemed to wrinkle, and his steel blue eyes missed nothing. Our intel cross-referenced similar cases with the same MO, victims marked as invisible runaways, addicts, isolated residents, or people like Ethan. "This is not arbitrary," Briggs frowned, rubbing the side of his jaw as the Vince confirmed sighting near Cold Pine Scout Camp 3 nights ago was relayed by Hanley. The trail indicated it was parked along the tree line, with the driver not identified and their face covered. The vehicle was registered under a fake ID. "Do we have probable cause for surveillance?" Hanley's response was straightforward. "We have already begun in Red Hollow." Emma Bennett crouched at the edge of the woods behind her clinic, clad in a heavy plaid coat, with gloves that were too big for her fingers, and jeans marked by the snow. Her expression was focused as she secured another piece of flannel to the branch of a loafer tree, where it fluttered gently in the breeze a few feet away. Danny Farrelline, bundled in layers of oil-stained canvas, unpacked a sealed container of cooked chicken into a shallow tin dish. "This the last one?" he asked. Emma nodded. "It's the trail he took before. I think his memory still holds." Danny offered a sit-along grin. "He is a canine." "Emma, you're speaking as if he's truly a shadow." She didn't glance up. "He is." They toiled in quiet, marking the path from the woods back to the town's outskirts. Emma had charted it according to the direction Shadow had disappeared after the rescue, marked by cloth strips infused with lavender oil and small fragments of Ethan's shirt, familiar scents linked to safety. The vet understood that animals often flee from trauma, yet a part of her, one that had once buried her own dog, recognized that some would return if given a reason to feel wanted. As they approached the final bend in the trail, Danny halted, raising his hand. "Emma," he whispered. She turned to see a figure standing at the tree line. Shadow. His coat was muddier now, his body leaner, ribs pressing slightly under his skin, but his eye-sharp amber steady met hers and did not waver. Emma dropped to a knee. "Shadow," she whispered. He didn't run. She held still. Shadow took one cautious step forward, then another, and soon he was running, landing in her arms. That afternoon, back at the sheriff's office, Shadow sat quietly in a corner of the conference room, a fleece blanket beneath him. He didn't wear a collar, his eyes moved slowly, watching each person without fear, just alert and understanding. Emma positioned herself next to him, her hands neatly folded in her lap, as they sat across the table. Briggs Clare, Agent Hanley, and Officer Reyes examined the documentation. Microchip alignment. Reyes mentioned advancing a digital scan identified as K9RG17 with the call name. Shadow was deployed under Officer Sarah Grady, who had been deemed Mia 2 years ago. Claire looked toward the dog, and somehow he never forgot who he was. Hanley remarked, "Dogs like this don't easily turn back. They either break or continue on." Briggs reclined in his chair, not merely continuing but bringing one of ours back. Emma extended her hand, softly placing it on Shadow's back. He remained unflinching. "That's why I'm requesting to hold onto him for the time being," she stated. "At least until you determine what comes next." Briggs nodded. "It's done, but I want him accessible. He's not just a witness, he might be our best lead." Later that evening, Ethan Ward ascended the steps of Emma's porch, still clad in his hospital attire, a fleece-lined jacket draped over his shoulders. He moved with caution, favoring his left leg. Yet there was a newfound steadiness about him that hadn't been present before. Emma greeted him at the door, guiding him inside. "He's in the back," she said. Ethan entered the living room. Shadow rested by the fireplace, dozing peacefully as Ethan drew near. The dog stirred, lifting his head, and for a long moment, they simply gazed at one another. Ethan knelt down despite the strain and spoke softly. "Hey." Shadow lifted himself up, nudged forward, and settled his head against Ethan's chest. Emma observed from the hallway, her gaze both tender and detached. She allowed them their moment. When Ethan finally rose, he turned to her. "He remembers." "I know," she responded, and they settled onto the couch. Emma pulled a blanket over her knees. "Did I ever tell you I had a dog once?" she said after a pause. "When I was 19, a lab mix, smart, sweet. He saved my life in a fire, but the smoke took him. I think I never stopped looking for him in every animal I treated after that. But Shadow, he feels different, like something came back." Ethan nodded, contemplating the possibility that he wasn't merely here for assistance. Perhaps he was here to complete what Sarah had begun. They remained silent for a time, while outside, the snow began to fall once more. Yet, within these walls, the stillness felt anything but frigid. The sun rose over the pines of Red Hollow, casting a radiant glow that seemed almost ritualistic, melting the frost from rooftops and illuminating the windows of the sheriff's office. Inside, a subtle urgency pulsed through the hallways. Mike Hanley stood at the center of the operations room, one hand resting on the edge of the map-coated table. "It's happening today," he said, his voice low but steady. "Coordinates locked." 2 hours before the handoff, Sheriff Briggs, grayer now than just weeks before, gave a sharp nod. "Everyone's briefed. No mistakes." In the corner, Shadow sat alert, ears pricked, gaze fixed on the projection of the wooded scout camp where the white van had last been spotted. Though the dog made no sound, his presence felt like a heartbeat in the room, calm but electric beside him. Ethan Ward, still in recovery, stood upright and rested his hand gently on Riz's back. "He's ready," Ethan said softly. The path into Cold Pines lay shrouded in stillness, with snow absorbing the sounds of tires and footsteps. The FBI tactical team, dressed in dark gear, glided like phantoms among the trees. They were not alone. Shadow guided them, his nose to the earth, tracing scent trails unseen by human eyes, with others following closely behind. Ethan walked with deliberate steps, his breath visible in the cold air. Though still on leave, he had received special permission to join the team. Shadow had only responded to him during training simulations, and no handler could replicate the bond they had formed in that warehouse days earlier. As the team approached a clearing, they spotted the white van parked beneath a collapsed wooden structure. Hanley raised a fist, signaling the team to halt. Ethan crouched beside Shadow, who was tense, tail stiff, and head tilted, ears twitching at sounds Ethan couldn't perceive. With a low growl, Shadow advanced, weaving behind crates and pausing to scent the air. A door creaked open and a tall, weary man emerged from the van, his face hidden by a ski mask. He held a clipboard in one hand, while the other remained buried deep in his coat pocket as he approached a stack of pallets. Another figure appeared, shorter and broader, clearly armed. Hanley's voice crackled softly over the radio hold, but Shadow suddenly veered left toward the back of the van. He stopped at the rear door and barked once, sharp and deliberate. Ethan's blood ran cold. That bark wasn't an alert, it was a warning. Hanley gave the signal, and the team surged forward. The taller man spun, dropped the clipboard, and reached for his waistband, but he was too slow. Within seconds, both suspects were disarmed, cuffed, and face down in the snow. Hanley yanked open the back doors of the van. Inside, curled in opposite corners, were two children, a girl and a boy, no older than 9. Their wrists were zip-tied, faces pale but conscious. The boy whimpered. The girl just stared wide-eyed until Shadow leapt into the van, lay between them, and licked the boy's cheek. The tension cracked, the girl sobbed, and the boy reached out, trembling, to touch hers fur. The news broke within hours. Helicopters circled Red Hollow. The rescue footage, grainy and trembling, showed Shadow emerged from the van, children clinging to his neck while agents flowed in behind him. National anchors uttered his name as if it were a legend, but back in town, life continued at a more subdued pace. Ethan settled next to Sheriff Briggs on the station steps, observing as Emma pulled up in her pickup. She donned a dark green parka, her auburn hair neatly braided, a faint smile playing on her lips. In the passenger seat, a tote filled with dog blankets and a cooler of food awaited. Shadow bounded out to greet her, sniffing the tote with approval. "He likes salmon," she teased. "Now you tell me," Ethan replied, standing to welcome her as Briggs moved forward, clearing his throat. "Emma Bennett, representing Red Hollow and the state of Oregon, expresses gratitude for your invaluable contribution to the safe return of Shadow and the identification of several victims." Emma gave a modest nod. "I just fed a stray." Briggs shook his head. "No, you fed a soldier that weekend." In the grassy lot behind the sheriff's office, a small platform had been set, folding chairs arranged in neat rows. The wind was cold, but the sun stayed bright. It was not a formal event, but the people of Red Hollow came anyway. Shopkeepers, students, firefighters, old women with wool scarves and war medals. At center stage stood a new badge, not a metal one for a man, but a collar tag engraved with the K9 seal. It read Shadow Red Hollow Sentinel. Ethan advanced, clad in his full uniform for the first time since his return, though his gait still bore the mark of a limp. His spine was straight as he knelt before Shadow, and with steady hands, he affixed the tag to the dog's collar. "Do you accept the call to serve again?" He spoke gently, more a ritual than an inquiry. Shadow let out a single bark as applause erupted from the audience. Emma brushed her cheek and murmured softly, "That's my boy." In the months that followed, Shadow walked every beat alongside Ethan, donning his vest once more, this time unmarked by scars beneath it. The children in town greeted him with cheerful waves upon spotting him. Locals left treats by the station door as the night shift stretched on, and the woods turned chilly. Shadow remained unfazed. He had returned not as a stray or mere memory of a lost companion, but as a protector with a renewed purpose. Emma launched the Second Chance Project, a training initiative for stray dogs brimming with potential. many rescued from shelters or abusive situations. Shadow became the program's emblem, and every Saturday, Ethan brought him to the field for demonstrations, where eager children would rush to greet him. They called him the Sentinel, not only for his past deeds, but for the vigilant presence he maintained. Sometimes, divine intervention doesn't come in the form of winged angels. It arrives in the shape of furry companions, steadfast and unwavering in their devotion. Once Shadow was adrift, a soul lost in the depths of darkness. Yet, even amidst the shadows, a divine light illuminated a path for him. This journey not only led him to save others, but also to find his own salvation. His story serves as a poignant reminder that no matter how shattered we may feel, redemption is always within reach. There exists a purpose, even for those whom the world has cast aside. In your own life, never underestimate the power of kindness, patience, and faith. They can awaken profound change. You may not wear a badge, but your love could be the miracle that someone else is desperately seeking. If this tale resonates with you, consider sharing it with someone who could use a glimmer of hope. Remark, oh, people below, if you hold the belief that every being, whether human or animal, merits a second chance, join us on our journey as we share more authentic tales of grace, courage, and the quiet protectors who walk alongside us. May blessings and protection be upon you and yours.